Hello everyone, and welcome to this next HTML tutorial. We'll be covering lists and forms today. You can find this tutorial at tutorialmode.com/basics, where you can learn about other basic tutorials on getting you started with different web languages. So today we're covering lists and forms. So we're going to start off with these three lists. These are the only three lists available to HTML. We've got unordered lists, ordered lists, and definition lists. Ordered lists and unordered lists are nearly the exact same. The only difference is unordered will have bullet points and ordered lists will have numbers. So you can see the syntax. So you got UL, which stands for unordered list. Then you got the item, which is started with just normal LI and closed with a /li. The content, point 1, which is here, is placed inside these tags. The list is ended with a /ul. It's quite the same, or it's nearly the exact same in ordered lists. The only difference is it's OL instead of UL. Next we have definition lists. These start with DL and close with DL. DL stands for definition list. Next we have DT, or definition title. This is where you'd place the title. So let's have a look at the example. As you can see here, title is title. Then we've got the item, which is sub-item. I don't know why I called it that, even though it is an item. It's not a sub-item, which is here. And here's the next one here. This is useful if you want to make a menu system or something similar to that. We'll talk about that in the future. It's just a different way of presenting information to the person reading your website. Anyway, next we're on to forms. Forms are very, very useful. They're actually the core piece to HTML. If it wasn't for forms, people would not be able to interact with web pages or websites. They're very useful if you're trying to find something, such as using Google, or if you want to save something. Let's say you're on Facebook and you're talking to your friend. When you're typing information into the web page, you're basically using a form. What happens is when you press send, the form gets sent to a server where it's saved, and your friend is notified on what you just said. So let's have a look at the structure. So instead of throwing all this at you, we're going to make it a very basic example here. Okay, so if you create a page and just add this information, so we've got HTML, we've got the normal HTML structure, so HTML head, title, /head, then we've got the body tags. But anyway, inside the body tag we have two form tags. We've got this one here and this one. This one here closes the form. This opens it up. Inside the form, the top form tag, we have action. Action is where you're going to send the information. Next we have method, which is used to tell the form what sort of form it is. There's two types of forms available, get and post. We'll be covering them in the future, but right now we're looking at get. A get is mainly used if you want to send information through the URL. I'll show you an example. So I've created this example, which I'm going to run now. So here it is here. So I'm going to type in this. This is an example. And this should appear right here. The pluses indicate spaces. You can also put this in, but don't worry about that. We'll be covering that later. That's more got to do with ASCII codes and what the URL can read. So as you saw here, the information I entered into this text box appeared right here. What happened then is a bigger, more powerful language such as PHP, which Facebook is made out of, will then read this information. So it's useful if you want to sign into a web page. Now the thing about that is you wouldn't use the get, you'd use post. So let's see what happens if we use post. Let's get rid of this here. So if we use post instead of get, let's see what would happen. So as you can see here, there's no information. But yet, this is the exact same form. I sent it, and yet there's no information here. The information, in fact, is actually hidden behind the browser. So it's useful to hide passwords and usernames, and so hackers cannot read what you're writing. Okay, so let's make this a little bit more complicated. Let's search Google. So http://search query equals search. Okay, you must change the name to Q. Q stands for query in Google. Okay, so you do this, save, and let's refresh the page. So let's say I want to search for tutorial mode. So let's go submit. And as you can see here, it takes you to Google. What I basically did is, if you can see the code, is I sent this information to google.com/search. Search is the name of the file, which will pick this information up. Then you got the information, or this, see this question mark here? Q equals tutorial mode. Tutorial mode is the information I just entered, as you saw. Q is the name of this text box. So what will happen is, when you send it, the URL or your browser will pick up that you're trying to send this information from the text box Q. Then the system will pick up Q and read the information that Q is equal to. So in this case, Q is equal to tutorial mode, and hence Google will display the information here. This is how a basic search system would work. Okay. So next we're going to cover text box. So we get rid of all this, and we're going to do it through the page, or to the tutorial. Okay, so here are some examples, or the different types of options you have when you're using forms. You've got a basic text box. Here's another text box, except I've changed the name up here. You can change it to whatever you want, as long as you change the name. Ensure the names are different when you're going to send a form. Next, you've got a checkbox. These are handy if you're going to fill in a form, or let's say you're going to register for a website. You might ask, do you want me to send you newsletters or information like that? If you press yes, obviously, then they'll start sending you information. So it's handy if you're given an option. Next is the radio buttons. You can only select one of the radio buttons. You can't select multiple boxes like the checkbox here. You can only select one. Finally, we got the text box, which is we got the text area, which is much like a text box. The only difference is you can expand this and add as much information as you want. And then last but not least, we have a drop-down box, which is useful. Let's say you're registering for a website and you have to say what country you're from. Generally, there's a text box where you select your country or your city or whatever. And then the final two buttons, reset will empty a form, while submit will send the form. So here's the code for each one of these. Again, you can find all of this at tutorialmode.com/basics. There should be a link in the description, and you can you can copy all this stuff yourself and modify it and play around with it. So, as you can see here, this is a normal text box. I've already covered this through my example, but you can see here the type equal text, and the name of this text box is equal to first. Text box is equal to first. Next, we have the password box. The only difference is, let me show you this. So I go input, type equals password /. I'm not putting a name in because I won't be sending this. Refresh the page. This here is the password box. Look at the difference. So if I type in hello, as you can see here, the information is hidden. But if I were to type it in to the normal text box, the information is shown. This is mainly used for password boxes. Next is the radio button. It's actually quite important that you have the word name here. So you can see here in my example. So you can see here, this here is what the source code looks like of this web page. They both have the same name. That's telling this browser that they're in the same group. So I'll make an example here. Let's put a break in. Okay, so radio, input, type to radio, main group. Let's copy that. So as you can see here, here are two radio selectors. So if I click on this, then I click on this, there's only one can be selected. You can have as many radio boxes as you want. I think they're called radio boxes, I'm not too sure. But you can have as many as you want. As long as only one is selected, the form will continue. You can also add selected if you want to have them select by default. So it's this, selected equals selected or not. Is it checked? Yeah. So you can add in checked. Don't add it like this. This is not recommended. You're better off keeping it like this. It's much more appreciated, if you want to call it that. So if you want one of the boxes to be selected by default, simply add this. You can add this one here as well. So there you go. Next we have the text box. Or sorry, hang on a second. Yeah, next we have the checkbox, which is basically this here. You can have as many of these as you want, and they are not put in groups, so you can select them all. So basically type in checkbox here in the type part of this label, or this tag. Then we have the selection box, which is this here, the drop down box, where you can add country, date of birth, etc. So it's much like a list. It has these tags here, which start as the select. Then each option is an item, and then you have the name beside each one. So when somebody clicks on, let's say somebody clicks on 2, or clicks on 1, and then they send the form. This here will have the value of 1. So when the PHP script, or whatever it is, when reading the form, will read this here is equal to 1. Next is the text area, much like the input box. The only difference is you can have as much or as many words as you want, and it can expand. Finally, we have the two buttons, submit and reset. Reset will empty the form. So if you added in loads of information, but you want to start again, you don't have to refresh the page. You can simply press the reset button. Let's say you're happy with the form and you're happy to know the information. You click the submit button. This will send the information to the action location. Next we have the actual form tag at the very top, or the send options. Action is the location where you'll be sending the information. In this case we've said mail to example@mail.com. Mail to basically will send the information to an email address. Please note you can't send emails straight from a HTML page. You need a PHP server or an ASP.NET script to actually be able to do it. We'll be covering that in the future. ENC type is the encode type, or the encryption type. Sorry, no, it's not the encryption, it's the encode type. So in this case we said text/plain. And then of course the method. You can also change the column width using this here, and you can also change the row height using this here. I think that's the end of this tutorial. Next we'll be covering images and embedding, such as embedding YouTube videos into your web page, or images. If you want to find this written tutorial, again, it's at tutorialmode.com/basics. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're on iTunes, you can find our podcast there. We don't just cover HTML, we also cover Java, C++, iPhone development, Android development, and styling web pages all the way to SEO, etc. and so on. There will be more tutorials coming in the future. Right now we're only covering HTML, CSS, Java and PHP, but we've got a full list which we'll be covering, and it should be full by the end of this year.